This is exciting. I'm a scooch early, a tiny bit early, but that's because, as usual, there's a few little technical snafus, but hopefully we have them all worked out. Hi, Wendy, you're my first eyeballs. Hi. Very exciting. We have eyeballs. So today, for those of you who are maybe tuning in later on YouTube or what have you, I am experimenting with doing this live in my Facebook group. I usually do it on my Facebook page, and there seems to have been some spam attempts and other scam sort of things as a result, so it may actually end up being easier to go back to doing it in the page, but that's technical back end that probably doesn't interest you at all. Today we're going to be talking about Lord Akeldama, so primarily Lord Akeldama if you have questions about the good vampire, but also there'll be time, I'm sure, for any other questions you might have about anything book related or writing related or reading related even. So this is our book under discussion for today. There it is. It is only digital, so I only have a digital version of it. So hopefully you have some questions for me, and I have a couple to get us started as well. But while I'm giving everyone a chance to tune in and everything, let's talk about the serious business of tea. Well, also, as per usual, I know it's been a while. I kind of forgot how this goes. Feel free and please do say hello or tell me where you're tuning in from. It's like my favorite thing later. I do this, I promise. I go back and like see all over the world where people are. It just, I don't know. It gives me a warm fuzzy feeling. It makes me feel really happy and global and worldly, so to speak. So today's tea, I'm just drinking a chai out of a mug. It's a very strong chai, and I made it very strong, and yeah. It's winter. It definitely feels like winter in my abode, so yeah, I'm in the office, and the office is really cold. So, well, it's really cold for me, the thin-skinned Californian. Right. The next thing I have to tell you is about my new teapot. Okay, so I have that epic blog post that's basically all the tea things I love, and in it you may or may not have noticed how many teapots I already own. And yet, I just bought a new teapot, and I have to tell you about it, because here it is. Okay, I know it seems really strange, but it is not in fact glass. It is, well, I mean it is, but it's like a Pyrex glass kind of thing. It's really cute. I know, it's clear. I got it because I've been obsessed with oolongs recently, and I just want to watch the leaves unfurl. But this little puppy is microwave safe and direct heat safe, so you can actually put it on a stovetop. So you can boil water in it, but also you can zap it in the microwave. There's a smaller version of it, which is just basically like a cup's worth, and I actually bought that so I could microwave milk to make hot cocoa. And I love it, or I could also use it for microwaving syrup for pancakes or waffles or whatever. And I love it so much. It is the best thing. So this one went on sale really briefly on Amazon, and I jumped on it because I was like, I'll just buy the bigger one for the office. So yeah, and it has a massive immersion, so the leaves really have room to move around and to breathe if you want to use the immersion. So I really like this new teapot brand. I highly recommend it. I'll pop a link in later, and I'll update my my epic tea blog post. I better make a note to do that, because otherwise I might forget. So that's my newest like excited tea thing. And here's the next thing. Hold on, let me write down about teapot new one update. It's so great. The little one is so good if you like live alone or live by yourself and you just want to like be able to heat up a small amount of liquid. Oh, I love it, because you zap it in the microwave and it has this nice big handle, even on the smaller one, and so the handle doesn't get hot, so you can zap the things. Oh, anyway, deeply exciting to me. Right, so that's the tea update. She pauses to have tea. The next thing I have to tell you is I am not really a chocolate person, but I am currently craving chocolate like crazy. And I usually do stash some chocolate at the office and there's no chocolate. And it's tragic. So this made me think, what kind of chocolate do I want? And I'm really egalitarian with chocolate. I like all the chocolates. I like the milk chocolate. I like the white chocolate. I know. I like the dark chocolate. But I like them like mixed with different things. So like I like milk chocolate with fruit ganache kind of things in them, and I like dark chocolate with nuts or toffee or caramel or whatever. And so this is my question to you at this moment in time. What is your chocolate thing? Like, what, if you eat chocolate, how do you like it? Which kind do you like the best? But most importantly, how do you have it with things? Like, are you a person who likes nuts with chocolate or caramel or whatever? So this is my, like, I'm currently obsessed with chocolate, and so I want everybody else to be obsessed with chocolate, and so we're going to talk about chocolate instead of tea for a little while. So leave a comment telling me about your chocolate obsession, if you have one. Or if you don't like chocolate, what you have instead when you're having a craving for a sweet treat. Right, so that was I guess the minutes of the meeting up front. Oh, I'm so ridiculous. It's been about 5 minutes and we've already covered really important stuff. Chocolate, teapots, and tea. What else is there in life? What we're going to be talking about today is this, which is the new it isn't little. It turns out it's pretty big. Somebody asked me if I were to provide a PDF, which I didn't, if they could print it out, and I was like, oh, how many pages is it? It's like 200 pages. So it's really book length. So yeah. But it is not really a book. It's a collection of, basically, I used to seed my blog to Lord Akeldama, the vampire, and the vampire would come on the blog and answer your questions, anybody's questions. So it was like a vampire advice column. And being a vampire of a certain age and inclination, most of the advice he gave is terrible. Just terrible advice, but a lot of fun. Like, ridiculously fun advice. For me, especially. Because, you know, I was writing it, right? You do realize Lord Akeldama doesn't actually exist. Don't tell him. Anyway, so I finally realized I had 10 years worth of these, and it's kind of a pain to like go through the blog and read them and stuff. So I just pulled them all down and assembled them and had them copy edited and tidied them up and reorganized and made them into a little book. And then I had a little bit of extra content, like deleted scenes from the series, and also like blog posts I've written, like behind the scenes interviews I've done with characters where the character was being interviewed by somebody else, and you know, stuff like that. So I just cobbled it all together into a book. And it's now out into the universe. However, you can only get it from me. So you have to go to my website to get it. It's gailcarriger.com. You can either buy it directly immediately from the website, or you get $2 off if you join the Chirrup first, which is my newsletter. So those are the two options. And there it is. I'm afraid it is only available direct to download and only in digital. I have reasons. The reasons it's only available directly from me is that because it is not a story, I was really scared that if I just put it up out into the world on places like Amazon or Kobo, that people would just buy it and assume it was a new book from Gail, it was a new story, and then be terribly, terribly disappointed when it was in fact just this sort of hodgepodge collection, and then get really mad at me and write me terrible reviews. And I function a lot out of terror and fear, so I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to take that risk. So that's why I didn't put it up on Amazon, etc. That's why it's just direct. And it is digital only because there's no way to do a print edition for me right now that that is a direct option. So in order to put a direct version, print version out into the world, I have to put that into Barnes & Noble and Amazon and storefronts like that. And then I would be right back in the same problem area where the book would be out, people would buy it, and it would be more expensive because it was a print edition, and then they get even angrier at me when it turns out not to be what they're looking for. So so that's why I didn't do it. Also, I wasn't kind of sure on how the layout or what it would look like, or if it would even make a really decent book at all. I have an idea of how to put like a fun workbooky kind of universe Bible thing together, but that takes a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Sophistication and ability than I currently possess in formatting books. But this kind of content would go into that if it ever happens. So just be aware that I am noodling on a print, this ending up in print somehow, but I haven't quite figured out how to do it, or the easy technology hasn't caught up with what I want to do yet, but I think it will soon. But rest assured, my print readers, that there's a special project print that will be print only in the works for you. Which I'm hoping, all fingers and toes crossed, comes out next year. So don't worry about that. That's in the works. So, and then the other thing is audio. So again, because it's so weird, because it is this like mix of all of this different content, I can't imagine how it would be audio. I don't know. It seems really complicated to make it audio. So, and yeah, an audio also. Ooga booga. Sorry, I'm just dropping things. Audio is also really expensive. So it costs thousands and thousands of dollars to do audio well, and I do audio well. I'm not interested in producing a low quality product, which means I pay my narrators high wages, and I have a producer to make sure the audio is really clean, and that just costs a lot. And I'm not gonna be lazy about it. And so yeah, it's either, as my mother always used to say, darling, do it properly or not at all. And I can't figure out a way to do this properly. So therefore, there's no audio. Sorry about that. But on the bright side, I am one of those authors who, whenever she does a book, like a proper storybook, I always make sure you do get audio eventually. Even the short stuff gets audio. So I am on your side also, audio listeners. Just in this one instance, it's just going to be digital, and I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. Please don't be mad. All right, so if you guys have some questions, start thinking about it. I'm seeing comments, sort of, but I seem to be mostly seeing like it's Facebook is telling me who's watching, but not really telling me who's commenting. So I'm gonna nip over on my computer, which is right here, and see if I can see the comments that way. Ooh. But I'd have to actually find the video. I'm sorry, everybody. This is really challenging. No wonder you guys aren't watching, because I can't find it either. Oh my god. I swear I'm in the group. I'm in the right group, right? Parasol Protectorate group. There it is. I'm gonna turn on commenting, Dick, because I think if it's in the group, sorry, I'm talking to the admin. I think if it's in the group, commenting has to be allowed. So please don't turn it back off again. Also, leaving commenting on maximizes the reach. So, let me see if it listens to me. Yes, okay. I'm leaving a comment. This is so much fun, you guys. This is Gail! Exclamation point. Will I see my own comment? Oh, all right. That should be working, I really hope. I should be able to, there it is. Oh, hey, I'm seeing comments. What a crazy, this is crazy. I don't understand this ecosystem at all. Hold on. Get your questions ready. I swear we're gonna. Yeah, I can't share it to my page. Okay. Well, this is lovely. Sorry about that, everybody. They don't make it easy, they really don't. Okay, so as usual with questions, please put a question mark at the beginning of your comment. That way when I'm scanning all the comments, I can see which ones are questions and which ones aren't. But I'm going to actually remember this time to start with the questions that people submitted ahead of time. So, yay, I remembered. I don't always remember. There were 3 questions ahead of time, and I'm going to get to them. So the first question asked, and I'm sorry I didn't write down who asked it. My bad. The first question asked what the source was for creating the character of Lord Akeldama. So is he a mix of other vampire characters or people I know? And the answer is essentially he is a little bit people I know. So I did grow up sort of San Francisco tangential to the fabulousness. And so there's some aunties and uncles that sort of leak in a little bit, and aunties who were uncles, and uncles who were aunties. And, but really, Lord Akeldama is an amalgam of his actual origin, which we'll get to, and Oscar Wilde, and the Scarlet Pimpernel, the character of the Scarlet Pimpernel. Particularly in how that character, the Scarlet Pimpernel, was portrayed in film. So there's a couple of different film versions of the Scarlet Pimpernel that I was thinking about. So yeah, those are the kind of inspirations, I guess you could say, for his character. That's the first question, and then the second question was, at what point did I know his history? So we'll get on to that immediately. For those who are maybe watching who are newer readers, I'm not going to say, but Lord Akeldama is, I know, it's the ultimate spoiler though, so even though I'm kind of okay with spoilers most of the time in terms of older works, I think this one ought to be kept to myself, or to those of us in the know. So anyway, he is a famous historical figure, Lord Akeldama, and for those of you who wanted to know at what juncture I knew he was going to be that figure, the answer is I knew all along. I always knew he was going to be that figure of history. I've been obsessed with that historical figure for a very long time, both in his fictional representations and in his historical journeys. I always pilgrimage to visit the mosaic in the stairwell of the British Museum, where he is currently hanging, and say hello. And I've always been, very excited to see new research and new iconography and new excavations on the subject of this particular historical figure as a former archaeologist. So yeah, all along is the answer to that. I always knew who he started out as. And yeah, I think, I thought I had 3 questions, but I only wrote down. I'm doing so well today, everybody. Whew. I honestly, I don't have that much brain power to go around, and these days it feels like I have less. The third question was, why don't I or you have a Lord Akeldama in your real life? And the answer to that is, I don't know, and I can't help you with that one. Perhaps if you don't have a Lord Akeldama in your life, you are the Lord Akeldama for everybody else. Perhaps it's one of those. And that's the answer. All right, now I'm going to take a look at what Facebook will show me so far as questions are concerned. And yay! There was a question in the group on the effect of supersaturation. Okay. So supersaturation is an event that occurs during World War I that affects the ether in the Parasolverse and causes a transition in reality and in the way everything like supernaturals and preternaturals, etc., are kind of interfaced with and react in reality. So it causes a chemical reaction in the atmosphere, essentially. And how do I do this? And certain individuals in the Parasolverse are instrumental in causing this, or at least limiting the effects of the damage. There's a suggestion in canon that had the intent and purpose of the original weapon that causes this destruction in World War I been allowed to completely occur, it probably would have destroyed the world. And so there are certain Parasolverse agents who go into action to mitigate the extent of the disaster. And they do manage to do it, but it is still a disaster. But it does cause sort of a global seed change in the way the magical system, for lack of a better way of saying it, operates in my universe. And it allowed me to reboot. So that's what supersaturation is, for those who don't know. And then I wrote an urban fantasy series, which may or may not be what happens to the Parasolverse post-supersaturation, and I think that is what people are asking about. And the answer is, if I haven't revealed it in the San Andreas Shifter series, then I either haven't decided what actually happened, because I know sometimes I don't have it all planned out, or it hasn't become important enough, or I have secret plans for it. So those are the options. So if you haven't gleaned the answer to your question from the San Andreas Shifter books, then you are being intentionally not told that answer, and so I'm not going to say anything. I haven't decided what I'm going to do about it, and so I'm not going to say anything. Or I've forgotten what I decided, and I'm not going to say anything because I forgot. Sorry. That's a non-answer for you. Woohoo! I'm doing well. Robin asks, how long to wait until the sequel for The Fifth Gender comes out? So I have talked about the fact that I have a really, really, really good idea for the next, that's the Tinkered Stars Mysteries series. And I do have a really good idea for it. I've even had the epiphany for it, which is what I say when I know the kind of opening scene or a key pivotal scene, and that means basically I'm ready to write it. So the answer is I'm ready to write it. I just haven't written it yet, and that's because I had other stuff to write. I had to write 3 books and a space opera for some reason known only to my creative muse. So that's what I was doing. Then I had to write a really dark planet set something or other folderol, so which is unpublished and probably unpublishable. So then I had to do that, and my brain was like, we gotta do this thing. And now my brain has decided it wants to write something that is in a series, but I'm not going to tell you which series, because I'm writing it right now. And I don't like to write any checks that I cannot cash, so I never talk about a book I've written until it's done, and it's done in a rough draft form. And that's because I have no faith in myself. And you would think, having written over 30 books, that I would have confidence that I can actually finish writing a book, and yet I still don't. And that's because I started my career way back when, being one of those writers who kept starting novels and then never being able to finish them. So there's a little part of me that remembers that teenager, and she was a teenager who could never finish anything she started, and so I'm paranoid. So I don't talk about the things I'm writing until I'm done with them. So I am about a quarter of a way through a new project right now. I'm doing it for Nano, so hopefully I'll be well over halfway through by the end of the month, and then I'll finish it, and then I'll talk about it. But until then, I'm just going to tell you it is in an existing series. So, but that means that because I only can write and focus on one thing at a time. I'm not an author who can write multiple projects. That's just not how my brain works. So that means I'm focused on this one, and then we'll see what happens next. But the next Tinkered Stars mystery is definitely a possibility. And if you're excited about the possibility because you are currently watching Great British Bake Off, then me too. The finals are coming up. It's very exciting. Victoria asks, are there other Parasolverse books in the works? Well, there's the special print project, which is hopefully coming next year. That's a Parasolverse project, but it's not quite a book. It's another me being experimental. And I have a couple of ideas. So those of you who are sort of paying attention may have noticed that the Claw and Courtship series is the one series that only has one book in it currently. And that's right here. It's this book. So this is there's only one book in the Claw and Courtship series, and it's this book. But I do want to write more in this series. So I'm not working on it right now for reasons just explained. But that doesn't mean I'm not thinking about it in the back of my head, like who I want to write next. So yeah. So there probably will be more Parasolverse books, but I'm not currently working on any at the moment. Ooh. Looking for question marks? Ashley says, my daughter wants to know if I will continue writing the Prudence books. So those are the Custard Protocol books, and the answer to that is no. I have no intention of doing so. Sorry. Although this one kind of takes place sort of afterwards. And there are definitely like appearances from those characters in the other spin-offs and stuff like that. I definitely write a sandbox kind of world where characters pop up in and out of other books all the time. But yeah, no, in general, if the series, which my series is that act like series is, so there's a continuing story arc from one to the next. So the Solace series and the Custard Protocol books and the Finishing School books, those ones are done. They're pretty, as far as I'm concerned, they're done. Now, I never rule anything out, but because they were for traditional publishers, they're kind of wrapped up in contracts and stuff like that, and it's just really complicated. If I wanted to write any of those characters as main characters again and not also take that book back to my traditional publisher, which I'm not opposed to, but I don't know if they can, I don't know if they're interested in doing that, quite frankly. But no, in general, when I finish a series, I consider it finished. And that comes from the fact that I'm pretty paranoid. I finish series and I really enjoy writing the last book in the series. So like Timeless was my favorite Parasol Protectorate book to write. Reticence was my favorite Custard Protocol book to write, and Manners and Mutiny was my favorite Finishing School book to write, because I get to tie up all the loose ends and because I get to make it as tight and as neat as possible. I like writing endings, and I like writing final books in series. It's kind of my favorite thing to do, really. And so I do consider it an end note. And that has to do with the fact that I've had way too many authors either die on me without finishing a series, which is very rude of them, or just continue a series that you're kind of like, you should be done now. Like, we're all done. 12 books is more than enough. It's time to stop. I like to say I feel like my characters like turn to me at a certain point and they're just like, okay, you've nosed in our business long enough. Enough of that. We're ready to go on with our lives without you interfering and constantly chronicling them. And I'm like, fair. They kind of deserve their happy endings and their privacy, so I'm gonna let them go. And not entirely, obviously, because they're gonna show up again, whether I like it or not. Especially Lord Akeldama, who seems to get into every book, whether I like it or not. What can you do, right? So yeah, that's did that answer the question? I hope that answered the question. Sarah asks, is Lord Akeldama's appearance younger than Alexia's? Well, it is now. He was 33 when he died, and I would say he looks probably relatively young for his age. And Alexia, of course, is now, well into her 60s in the various series. So yeah, he definitely looks younger than her now. In the Parasol Protectorate series, he probably looked a little bit older than her, because she's relatively young in that series. She's in her mid-20s, I think, as a spinster in Victorian London. Aw, there's some lovely compliments. Thank you, everybody, for the nice compliments in the comments. Ty asks how Nano is going. So I was reporting on Nano with on my friend's podcast, The Everyday Novelist, but he's having crises and is like not getting them updated. So I'm happy to give you all a Nano report. For those of you who don't know what it is, NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Month, and it takes place during the month of November. and you're supposed to write approximately 1,600 words a day in order to have about 50,000 words done at the end of the month, which, so far as Amazon is concerned, actually counts as novel length. In general, just for your own edification, in most of the genres, that does not count as novel length. That's pulp length. And pulp is not a length that is really published very much anymore. So children's middle grade is usually around 60, well, it could be 50, 40 to 60 is for middle grade. But YA usually is, 75 or longer, and then adult is usually 85 at least, usually 90,000 words or longer. So, but for NaNoWriMo, you're supposed to write 50,000 words in 1 month, and that counts as winning. It's supposed to be a new project, although they've kind of relaxed some of the rules recently. And it has a whole social structure system where you can have accountability buddies and you can kind of team up with little groups. It's a very large organization at this point in time. I don't really do it because I discovered NaNoWriMo after I was a full-time professional writer, and I'm always on some sort of cycle where I'm in the middle of a book, or I need to do revisions in November, or I have a book. For years I had a book that released in November. Many of the finishing school books released in November, so I was on book tour. So it doesn't work for me to do Nano. Nano, I think, is really designed for newer authors to really develop their muscles, or just to really encourage people who struggle to get words on the page to get words on the page. I struggle, but it is my livelihood, so I will get the words on the page, whether I like it or not. And most of the time, being a classic author, I don't like it and I don't want to do it. So all that to say, I don't usually actually do Nano, but for the last couple of years, I have sort of done it. So I wrote a Nano project last year, and then I tried one the year before, the year before I was finishing a project. So I used Nano to get the finality of a book done. And it's relatively successful. I am a social writer. Like, I do like to sit with other writers and just type across the table from them at cafes. I like ambient sound when I'm writing, that kind of thing. So it does work for me in that regard. And this year I am really trying to win it. So this is the first year where I have a brand new project, and I am trying to get all 50,000 words done. So yes, how is it going? Pretty good. I've pretty much made the word count every single day. And I think I might even, I've gotten a few words on the page today, but I have to finish more this evening. This is not the kind of writer I normally am. Normally I'm a little bit more of a binge writer. So normally, for anyone who cares, I write 4 days a week in the afternoons, and it's 2,000 words a day or more when I'm writing a new project. And that's how I do it. So I basically write solid for 4 days, Tuesday through Friday. And then I take weekends off, and then Mondays is all for business. So I need to email and all that sort of stuff. So that's normally how I do it. So it is a little weird for me to actually write fiction every single day. I'm not that kind of author. I know there are plenty of authors that are that way, that actually it is a muscle that they just exercise every single day. But that doesn't normally work for me. So that is a little strange to have to put on the fiction hat every day. But not as weird as I thought it was going to be. I'm also dictating. So this is my first time trying to dictate fiction. I dictated large portions of this book because talking nonfiction out loud is really easy for me because I used to be a teacher. So that's not a problem, dictating nonfiction. But dictating fiction is different. And so I'm experimenting with that. I was at a writing retreat just last month. And one of the other authors there is a very prolific author, and she dictates using exactly the same system that I wanted to use, which is basically Mac iOS native dictation, which is just the dictation that comes with my computer, and Scrivener, which is the tool that I use to write. And she has been having great success with that. And so I was like, okay, I'll just try it. So the extra challenge for me for Nano is I'm trying to dictate this book. That bit is going less well. I keep getting frustrated and then typing like halfway through, so I would guess I'm dictating about 50% of the time. And it is not great for fiction. I really struggle with it, but more importantly, it kind of uses a different kind of my brain, so the prose is slightly different. So the prose in this book is going to be a little bit more like, say, Vixen Ecology. There's a little bit more kind of exposition and slightly less dialogue. So I might have to go back in and change some of the stuff I've written back to dialogue and things like that. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be more editing on the back end. But anyway, so that answers that question. How's Nano going? Is anyone else doing Nano, or any of you doing Nano? If you have Nano questions, feel free to ask me. I don't know how helpful I can be on the crafting, rough drafting stage of a book, but I'm interested to know if anyone in the group is doing Nano. I'm just looking for any new questions. Rhonda asks, how did I come up with the pet names Lord Akeldama assigns to his crew? My little squash blossom. Oh my god, those pet names. In the new book, the Dear Lord Akeldama book, there's actually a list that an enterprising fan came up with of all the pet names he uses in the Parasol Protectorate series. And you can see, and I can see from that list, embarrassingly, that I did repeat his endearments a couple of times. I did try to come up with a unique one each time, but sometimes I failed. So I tend to go with food or flower endearments with him. And I just, at first it was just, you know, from the spontaneous, what is that, Austin? Chiefly inspired by the spontaneity of the moment. I think that's the Mr. Collins quote. But sometimes they were premeditated. It got rough for a while. I did have to like go to the internet and sort of look stuff up and things, because I gave myself this challenge where he was supposed to give a new one all the time, and I started to run out of ideas. Terribly embarrassing. There it is. Yeah, so initially I was sort of just coming up with them on the fly, and then eventually I had to start keeping a list, and then I had to start looking them up. In terms of the reason I chose food and flowers is because I am obsessed with food, especially pastries, so that helps me. My mother is a professional gardener. She's a landscape architect / gardener, and so I grew up around flowers and flower names, specifically British ones. She always knew the British common name, as she would say, the common name, darling. And so a lot of the flower names I just, you know, had from my upbringing, basically. And then I started to branch out once my brain failed me. Robin asks, will there be more Spoo and Virgil? So those are two characters that I have considered writing more for, but no epiphany has happened for them, but they're definitely possible characters, absolutely, yes. I'd love to write their adventures. I think that would be really fun. I think it's kind of calling out for a YA series if I did that, but yeah, but they're in the docket. Sarah asks, was Lord Akeldama a king of... Yes, he was. Sarah, that is correct. The last one, kind of. The last major one. All right, it looks like I've gotten all of the comments with questions so far, and we're... Oh, I'm sorry. That's me. It's not an earthquake. I'm just hitting my stand. Thank you all for sticking to the topic of asking about Lord Akeldama, but you should feel free to go off topic now if you like. Or we can just gab for a bit about life, the universe, and everything. Robin asks whether I've read Naomi Novik's Scholomance series. Is that the one with the dragons in the Temeraire? The dragons in Napoleonic Wars? Because I thought that was extremely clever conceptually. But no, I have not. I read the first one in that series, and I've read her Spinning Silver. No, I've read her Uprooted. Spinning Silver is the second one. Uprooted is wonderful. It's a really fantastic book. I highly recommend it, everybody. If you're into sort of alternate fairy tales, it's not quite a fairy tale retelling. It's more like a reimagining of fairy tale-ness, for lack of a way of putting it. But I don't think I've read that particular series that you're suggesting, Roman. Sorry. Ashley asks if there is or will be a backstory book for Lord Akeldama. I don't know. That's a really good question. He does have such a long life that it would be fun for me to write, kind of as, you know, as the archaeologist person. I can imagine doing that. Like, what happened right after he was changed? How did he adapt? How did he end up down in Egypt? Because we know he went to Egypt at one point, or he returned to Egypt at one point, that sort of a thing. So I can imagine it. It would probably be one of those, like, vignette kind of things told in a series of articles and discoveries and diary posts. It would be really fun. But I don't have any concrete plans for it at the moment. Dark Magical School. Okay. So Naomi Novik has like a finishing school sort of series. Oh, that sounds really fun. I'm sure it's brilliant because she's brilliant. Oh gosh, the questions are coming thick and fast. Beth asks, did I say I use Scrivener? I use Scrivener, not Scrivener. And that they're currently using Word to organize. I used to use Word because I've been writing long enough that there was no Scrivener, and I'm a Mac person. I don't know why that may not use Word. I used Word because Word was the only option, okay? Back in the day, it really was the only option for a very long time. I hate it. I hate Microsoft Word. Flames! I hate it so much. Mostly because it went through a phase where if you write long form, which novelists do, it just started to crash. And if it crashed and you hadn't saved recently, it would lose all of the words you had written. And you had to remember to save because there was no autosave back then. It was a nightmare. And so Word kept just losing my stuff, and I just, oh God. Anyway, I still have to use it because if you work with traditional publishing or most editors, you have to work out of .docx when you get to the editing phase. So I still do. I actually have a second computer which has an old version of Word on it on an old operating system because I refuse to buy the subscription to Word in the cloud or whatever it is that Microsoft is doing now. Never. They will never get another penny out of me. That terrible program. Ooh, I hate it so much. So yeah, I am obviously a complete Scrivener convert. I love it. It is a beast of a program. It is too much. There are too many options. It's kind of overwhelming. I totally get it. I really recommend watching like videos about how to use it on YouTube or what have you if you're overwhelmed by Scrivener, because it's an overwhelming program. But I have it set up and I have arranged it with templates and stuff so that it works perfectly for me. And I love Scrivener. I don't use it to its full capacity though. There's a lot of tools that it has that I don't use. For example, I don't use Scrivener to generate my ebooks, that kind of thing. So I don't always use it as much as I maybe should. It's a very robust program. It's just too robust sometimes. I feel like it's a little overkill. It's like one of those menus at a diner where there's just, like the menu just keeps opening. There's just too many options and you're like, I don't actually need 15 different kinds of burgers. Like, just give me the 4 burgers that you do perfectly and I'll pick whichever one I like. You know, that kind of thing. Tragedy of choice. Is that what it's called? Anyway, it feels like, sometimes I feel like that with Scrivener, but I do love it. I highly, highly recommend it. Now, that said, I'm a real visual writer, so I really like to see my stuff laid out in scenes and chapters, especially nonfiction. Like, it's particularly great for nonfiction, but I also like it with fiction. I like to color code it, so I can be like, oh, that scene I haven't revised yet, but that scene I have. And I can just tell, like, at a glance. That kind of thing. So, and for me, Scrivener is a real visual interface. And I kind of think that way. So if you see, when I post extras for books, sometimes I'll post, like, sketches I've done. And that's because when I'm writing a fight scene, for example, sometimes I'll actually sketch it out. when I did the pack house for the San Andreas books, I actually drew that house out because I wanted to know what the layout of the grounds were and stuff, and just to sort of keep it in my head. So when I say I'm a visual writer, like, it's actually visual. Like, I'll draw maps for myself and schematics of how a fight scene progresses, if there's multiple people involved and things like that, because I just visualize that way. So having a program that facilitates that, which Scrivener very much does, is really intuitive to me as a writer. It just really works very well for me. But I understand it isn't for everybody. But yeah, no word if I can possibly help it. There are plenty of writers I know who write in words, so please don't feel like you have to abandon that one, no matter how much I hate it. Frankly, I have a very dear friend who writes her books longhand because she is crazy. I can't imagine that. So she writes them longhand, then she dictates them from the longhand. Madness, I tell you, madness. But it's just how she thinks. It's just how she writes. Victoria asks, do I think we will hear more on the first daughter? The first daughter? I don't know what that means. You'll have to tell me again, Victoria, what you're asking about. I probably have moved on from whatever the topic was. Mari asks, have I read Legends and Lattes? Was it you who recommended this one before? I think I have it on my TBR, but no, I haven't gotten it. Honestly, I have not had a chance to read very much recently. You might have noticed in the Chirrup that I haven't been recommending books as much as I usually do, and I just, don't worry, I'll get back to it. But I've had a lot of writing on my plate recently. So I have this new book. I had revisions on that 3-book YA space opera series, and then I have a new nonfiction book that I'm writing all at the same time. My hands are really, really starting to go. One of the reasons I'm really trying to learn dictation is because I'm doing a lot of typing. So from, a couple of years ago when I was in a real slump but I wasn't doing much, suddenly I'm like, blah, blah, blah. So one of the things that has gotten sacrificed in the madness is my reading time. I'm just writing. Kit asks if we will see Felix Mercy again, and Felix is one of the ones that when I continue the Delightfully Deadly series, I have considered Felix getting his own book. So, Victoria specified, will we get more on the first metanatural? I don't know. That's another one like Lord Akeldama's backstory. It rides on my willingness to write that far back in history. So it's possible because I love those time periods. But my particular area of expertise is not that time period. And I do tend to lean on places and times that I'm familiar with from my other life. But it's a possibility. What did I think of the new Persuasion? Robin, do we have to talk about that? I don't want to talk about it. I think that all of the critiques of it were perfectly well-grounded and well-founded. That's how I feel about the new Persuasion. And I say that as a self-confessed non-Persuasionite. I know if you're like a true Austen fan, Persuasion is supposed to be your favorite of Austen's books. I do not like that book. I mean, it's Austen, so I read it and enjoyed it, and I do love the good adaptations of it. But it's not my favorite Austen book. Pride and Prejudice is my favorite, and I know that makes me terribly basic. But Pride and Prejudice is my favorite. I really like Sense and Sensibility too, but Pride and Prejudice is my favorite. And I'm going to stick with that one. It's the only one I ever reread. It's the only one I really go back to. So, there it is. It's my favorite Austen book. It's not Persuasion, which I've only ever read the once, I think. I know. My best friend is fainting in her couch, onto her fainting couch. Any advice on buying domains or web hosting? Ooh, Nicole, I don't think I'm your girl. I'm trying to think of what I do. So I think I have the web host through something untenable and probably not recommended like GoDaddy. And then I have a different host for the WordPress. So I use Flywheel, who I like quite a bit, and I did move to Flywheel from somebody else. But yeah, I think that is accepted advice, but I'm sorry, it's been 20 years since I had to make that decision in terms of my own website. So I'm sorry, I wish I could be more helpful. Mari says Pride and Prejudice is their favorite as well. Yay! The little Pride and Prejudice camp in the corner. I know it's not supposed to be, but I don't know. I like the family. Huh. Yeah, so shocking. I like the family of sisters. I think you guys can probably tell from what I write that I like to write families. Now, most of my families are found families, but I like an ensemble cast of eccentric characters around my heroine or hero, around my main character. And I think that's what Pride and Prejudice gave me that I really loved. And they're generally, for all they are unlikable in some regards, they're generally pretty lovable, the Bennets, especially if they're portrayed comedically. And that's what I like too. I think one of the essays I wrote many, many moons ago was on how strategic Austen is in her use of comedy and how she's a great comedic author. And I think Pride and Prejudice is one of her books that really highlights how funny she can be. And that's another reason it's one of my favorites. Mari asks how Lilliput is doing. Lilliput is wonderful. I can tell you who loved lockdown. Cats. Cats love lockdown. Our cat could not have been more delighted over the course of the last few years. She had both humans home with her all the time. She had her choice of lap at any point, whenever she wanted. She has become the most spoiled cat, I swear. But she's wonderful. She's great. I love my cat. My cat is great. She's very much a puppy cat. For those who've not met Lilliput before, she comes when she's called. She does tricks. She flops when any new human enters the house. She has to run to the front door to greet them. She's a weirdly social puppy cat. So, yeah. So she has had a great time during lockdown. She's gotten slightly portlier, not by much though. She's still a tiny little cat. Rhonda asks if I'm excited for the second part of Alchemy of Souls. A brief moment of K-drama. Code of K-drama. But yes, but do we think it's being made? Because they keep doing this to us. If you're a mad K-drama fan like I am, they keep doing this thing where they're promising us a second season and then... I mean, like, I've been waiting for a second season of Uncanny Counter since the first season came out, and it hasn't happened yet. So yes, of course I am, because they kind of left it up in the air, and now I really want the second season. For those of you who saw me crow about Alchemy of Souls, I mentioned it in the Chirrup. It's basically like a K-drama meets the CW. I have a weird love of the CW, okay? I like odd, trashy, in a good way, trashy, like, fantasy stuff, you know, with, like, two pretty people who kind of or really can't act, and like fabulous 90s inspired leather bustiers and on the men and the women, and like everybody just looking like they came out of a perfume ad, but they're actually pretending to be in high school or something like that. I just love this kind of thing. I think it's a weird kind of version of camp and pop culture that's very fascinating. And so Alchemy of Souls was essentially Korea doing their version of that as a historical fantasy. And it's terrible and great. And it's the kind of thing I really love. But it did end on a bit of a cliffhanger, which was disappointing. I don't like cliffhangers. So, yeah, so we are hoping for a second season, but I don't have a lot of hope. Korea's history with second seasons is not awesome, so fingers crossed, but also, we'll see. Sarah asks about Tilly Wallace's Manners and Monsters series. I have not read it. Sorry, so I can't comment, but if you'd like to post about it in the group and see if others have read it and want to have a discussion, please do that. Using question mark to boost another question, says Maya. Origin of Lord Akeldama's name. So the origin of Lord Akeldama's name is Akeldama, which I think actually is pronounced Akeldama, but I'm not sure on that because I don't speak Farsi among any other Persian root languages. So I'm not entirely sure what the Aramaic, it's originally I think an Aramaic word, how it's pronounced. But it was the meaning behind the word that was the reason I chose his name. And because all of the vampire characters, at least in the Parasol Protectorate series, had names that connected to consumption or blood in some way. So death, consumption, blood, cadavers, killing, those sorts of things. And so when I picked Lord Akeldama's name, I went with that particular word because it means field of blood. And so I just really liked the meaning. So it doesn't have any particular historical character connection, but I did really love the meaning of the word. So that's why I chose it. Plus it has a nice mouthfeel, and it looks cool on the page with the A and the K. I think about, when I'm choosing names, I think about the first letter of the name because I don't want too many characters in the same series or book with the same first letter of the name. Visually, I don't like the way that looks on the page since names are capitalized always. So I think about that. I also want to make it kind of easier for my narrators to kind of distinguish characters and stuff. So I tend to try and pick from all over the alphabet when I'm naming my characters. That's one thing I think about. I think about the meanings most of the time. Sometimes I don't think about the meanings at all. These days, that has really bitten me in the bum. So I now tend to also search and research any names, even the ones that occur to me spontaneously. What else do I do when I'm naming? Yeah, and then I think about like the mouthfeel of it. Like some words to me have better mouthfeels than others. Akeldama or Akeldama, either way, the way your tongue moves in your mouth, it makes me very pleased. So I was raised on audiobooks. I didn't have a television growing up, and so the way things sound and feel in the mouth really informs a lot of my writing decisions. I tend to do an audio pass on my books as well, where I will read the whole book out loud to an empty room because the way something sounds is really important to me. So I think about audio quite a bit, probably more than a lot of other authors because of my upbringing. So that's the name. I'm sure I have other reasons behind names, but those are some of them. Robin wants to know if we get a novella on Percy and Arsenic meeting the parents. Oh my god. Oh, Percy taking arsenic to his mother's. That's Ivy for anybody who's confused as to why this is making me chuckle. I have thought about it. I think that would be a fun little snippet. I've thought about like doing sort of holiday snippets, like Percy taking arsenic to meet the family over the holidays, or Sophronia and Soap visiting Dimity over the holidays, that kind of thing. I think there would be fun little like scenes to sort of write, but yeah, that would be a particularly funny one. Those are definitely always up for grabs, but honestly, you can always write it yourself. I don't read fanfic, and I'd rather not know about it, but I'm not against people writing it. You should have fun. However you can find your fun. Scanning through for any additional... Tiara wants to know about Crudrat. Okay, so all cards on the table, I did think I was going to be writing the second book in the Crudrat series for Nano this year. That was what I had intended, except unfortunately for those very few of you who would like more Crudrat, and there aren't very many of you, these other two characters really wanted their story to be told. So I had to tell their story because they were insistent. And it's a setting that's particularly exciting to me. This particular book series. This particular book in this series has a really fun setting for me personally, given my own history. So they won, Nano. But yeah, I do have a really solid idea for the second card wrap book. So the second card wrap book and the second fifth gender book are definitely two that I really do want to write soon. But I can only write as fast as I write. I have a lot of books, and I have a lot of plans for books. Fortunately, since I've written the books, at least you can have some confidence that I'll write the books as well. Okay, where was I? Somebody's asking about the sooties. Maybe? I don't know. Possibly? Mari asks if I feel the way words feel in my mouth when I'm just saying them in my head. Maybe there's a weird kind of synesthesia that goes along with that. Actually, I will speak things out loud. I will speak names and phrases out loud as I'm writing. Not when I'm in a coffee shop, of course, but if I'm just like writing at home or writing here in the office, then I'll just occasionally, you just hear me say a word out loud. It must be very weird for anybody listening in, but usually nobody's listening in, so it doesn't really matter. You know how some readers will like mouth the words as they're reading? I occasionally will do that as a writer. I'll also make myself laugh occasionally. And that sometimes I can't control. So when I'm on like writing retreats with other authors, occasionally they will just hear me kind of mad cackling in a corner. So pity them, because it must be a little scary sometimes. Elizabeth asks, where did Biffy's name come from? Oh, and Elizabeth says that they've started using Biffy as a non-binary. Oh, that's great. Where did Biffy's name come? Well, it's from Rabifino, but I think Biffy came up first. So Biffy was a character that was really meant to be a side character. Did not intend him to have the story arc he had, to have the ultimate romance that he had, to become as important as he was. He actually became important because of the necessity of the text, or the necessity of the plot, right? So it turns out that some of the secrets of Alexia's father's past were tied up with Lyle. And from Changeless on, Lyle was actually my secondary point of view character. So I was mostly writing from Alexia's point of view, but in order to have a character back in London, which I needed to do for Changeless, I used Lyle back in London, because I love Lyle and I identify very strongly with him, and also he made the perfect secondary point of view character, because he, like Alexia, is also practical and has a really interesting way of looking at the world. So it was Alexia and Lyle, and that continued through most of the books, and then I realized that it was Lyle's past relationships with Alexia's father that were going to be sort of the driver for the latter part of that series, and so he needed to be more secretive. So I couldn't have him be the secondary character anymore. So then I started using Biffy. And that's how Biffy became a much more important and significant character. So it's totally accidental. Sometimes it's totally intentional. Like, for example, Ivy Hisselpenny's story arc, I knew all along. Tunstall's story arc, I knew all along. But Biffy's, I did not. I did not realize he was going to become important. Which I think is why I ended up having to write because I didn't really have it like planned from the get-go. I ended up having to write this book to finish Biffy, essentially, also Lyle, but mostly Biffy's kind of story arc out, because he was late to the game, shall we say. So anyway, so his name was just a silly drone name to start with, and then I had to kind of retcon where it came from and his origin story and all that sort of a thing. So, and don't get me wrong, I'm delighted he became an important character, because he's now very, very dear to me, and very dear to my heart. But his was not planned, that story arc. I apologize for the crying over the meat scene, but it was necessary. Nicole asked about the podcast. Yes, Nicole, you're like our one fan for the NanoCast when we do it. I was like, oh, I bet Nicole is missing this. And it's Dan, who actually does the podcast, who does the editing and posting and everything. it's just apparently hell up there right now, or the opposite of hell, because he's snowed in, there's family in crisis, it's just crazy. And so I'm not putting any pressure on him to get the podcast out because it's kind of insane in his life. So yeah, it will happen, but maybe it might, because we are doing sporadic recordings. I think we've had 4 or 5 of them, and he will post them eventually. It just might be a little bit later than we were hoping. So that's the podcast. Tara's asking, I'm sorry, Tara, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Did anything like that happen for the finishing school series? So did I have any surprises from characters that kind of suddenly became important or didn't? And actually, no. That is because that series was written, so the way the Parasol Protectorate series was written, I sold the first book, and then they contracted me for a second book, and then I put a cliffhanger at the end of the second book, so they contracted me for a third book, and then as I was writing the third book, I was like, I need 2 more, so I had another contract for 2 more books, so that's why there are 5 books in that series. Okay. But that's also why, because I didn't really know how many books there were going to be in that series. We didn't know anybody would ever read it, right? Soulless was an incredibly surprise hit. Like, nobody expected that book to do well. I'm still surprised, quite frankly. 13 years later, I'm still startled. Amazing. What an amazing career that book has given me. Anyway, so when the Finishing School series came around, I pitched that as a 4-book series. So it was sold as 4 books, which meant I had to write treatments for all 4 books. Essentially, I had to write kind of cover copy for all 4 books. I always intended it to have an arc. I knew that the arc was the destruction of the mechanicals and the involvement of the picklemen and the flymen and these secret societies, and that it was all going to be about this technology. I'm really interested in technological regression, so the theory part of my previous career, I'm technically an archaeologist, but technology is what I studied. I studied how technology changes in ceramics in particular. And so I'm very interested in voluntary abandonment of technology, which we see throughout history, but is less chronicled. And that's what I was working on my PhD on. So we do have these instances in history where it logically, you would think humans would have evolved to accept a new advanced technology. The best example I can think of off the top of my head is the Romans introducing the wheel to Scotland, the potter's wheel. But we have very clear evidence that it was adopted while the invaders or occupiers were there and then abandoned by the locals. So in Scotland, in the lowlands of Scotland, for example, the wheel was roundly rejected and then not used again for 200 years. It was literally as though the Scots were like, yes, but we'll discover it on our own. So they used it while the Romans were there, and then when the Romans left, they stopped using it and picked their old ceramic technology. They had been occupied for almost 200 years. So they must have had an oral tradition of this pottery for generations. It's mind-boggling, the things people do around technology. Anyway, sorry, I got distracted by archaeology for a second. So I knew that the Finishing School series was going to be this overarching arc about a culture's choice to abandon an advanced technology, because you know, if you've read the Parasol Protectorate series first, that the mechanicals don't exist anymore. So something happened. And so the Finishing School books, ostensibly, that's what they're about. They're about the something that happened that caused this technology to disappear. They're also about all this other stuff, Sophronia and her relationships and her friends and, you know, that whole complexity, and spies. But I did know it all. So, and it wasn't like meticulously written out, but I am an outliner. So I had a pretty decent outline for the entire series, and which to me, I think makes for a more cohesive series. As a series, I think The Finishing School is probably one of my best because it's tighter. It had to be tighter because it was YA. You have to write tight when you write YA. But also, it had to be tighter as a cohesive 4-book series because I had it all outlined and everything. But that does mean there was no real room for like a Biffy level spontaneity event to occur, right? A serendipity event like that, because it was more planned. And because I did write and then each book would be published before I had like sort of finished writing the next one. So I couldn't edit. So as I was writing the second book in that series, I couldn't go back and edit the first one. So I had to be pretty precise about what information I put on the page. So I made the mistake with Soulless and Changeless in putting like too much out there, and then I had so many threads to tie up, right, that eventually I had to write spin-off novellas to tie up all of these threads. So I didn't want that to happen with the YA series. So that's why it is the way it is. And then the Custard Protocol series was different again. So the Custard Protocol series actually exists as two duologies for me as a writer. So I wrote the first two, and I knew I'd be writing two, and I wrote those two as a cohesive story arc. That's Prudence and Imprudence. So those are the ones where Rue is the main character. And then I had the second two books as a separate contract, and I intentionally wrote those two. They tie to the first two, but really they also kind of stand independently. And that, again, was intentional and planned. So those are also planned, but they were planned as two duologies, not as a 4-book series. So the new young adult-ish space opera series that I'm writing, it was written very cohesively as a 3-book series. So it's currently my favorite of all of the series that I have written. Hopefully it will be coming out next year, that one. How are we doing for time? Oh, it's time, so please stop asking questions, and I'll run through the very last of the ones that I can find quickly, just to wrap this up. It looks like we don't have very many questions left. Oh, good. Okay. Ooh, one last question from Ashley. My daughter, who is 12, wants to know if they will be doing more YA books. The answer is yes. I have written a 3-book YA series. It is a little on the more adult end of YA, but it is YA currently as it stands. It could get changed if the publishers want me to change it. And it's out on submission right now, which means it's out visiting editors. And we'll see if they want it. The caution for all of you watching this is that young adult space opera, which is what this is a terrible genre. It does not perform well. It is not something that YA markets well, or that readers seem to be particularly interested in. There's dystopian and stuff like that, but mine is like rollicking adventure space opera. It is set in a like a crazy fun entertainment industry on a galactic level, all about celebrity and stuff like that. It's about a barista on a moon who's recruited to go into an alien singing competition. And these aliens may or may not be trying to take over the galaxy with their music. We don't know. So it is a lot of fun, and it is a great series, and it is a tight 3-book series, and I'm really freaking happy with it. But I don't think it's going to sell. But it is out on submission, so we'll see. And if it doesn't sell, do not worry. I'll be putting it out on my own. So yeah, and I talked to the Chirrup, my newsletter, about the nitty-gritty of this kind of thing, and the Chirrup knows first if something's happening. So if you can't catch a live, the Chirrup's once a month. It has all the gossip, it has all the information on what I'm writing and what I'm thinking about writing next and all that sort of a thing. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, and that's the freebies and all sorts of extras and perks and stuff as well. So that's my newsletter basically, and yeah, you can just sign up on my website. But it is a lot of fun. Oh, Ashley says that their daughter might love it. Yay! I hope so. I think it's a really fun series. But you know, the market, the publishing industry is kind of crazy right now, so who knows? But rest assured, either way, it's coming out next year. Either traditional publisher will pick it up and probably bring out the first one, hopefully sometime next year, or if they don't, I'll be doing it myself, and I'll be doing it pretty quickly because I love this series and I want people to read it as soon as possible. So yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you to anybody who took the risk to try the Dear Lord Akeldama digital. I know the technology was a little difficult for some of you, and I really appreciate it especially if you pre-ordered it. But also, if you bought it, thank you for giving it a chance and for loving Lord Akeldama as much as I do. He is one of my favorite characters in the universe, and he's definitely a real pleasure to write, so I hope he is a pleasure to read. And I will see you at another live soon. Hopefully there won't be as big a gap as there has been, but life has been complicated recently. And take care of yourselves. I love you all. Happy reading, happy nibbles, enjoy your teas in whatever form they take, and I will see you all again soon.